Click a button, the invoice clears and a new number appears. Enter your items, press Tab for a new row. Click another button and the invoice tracker updates itself. It looks easy because it is. Let me show you how to build this automated invoice system in Excel so you can customize it to suit your needs. We'll start by setting up the invoice template. Mine will be quite simple, but like I said, it's fully customizable. Here I've got a new Excel file. I've set the column widths just to save me some time, but otherwise it's an empty workbook. And the first thing I need to do is save this as a macro-enabled workbook because we're creating macros to automate some tasks. So I'm going to use the F12 key to open the Save As dialog box. And here I want to change the workbook type to .xlsm, Excel Macro Enabled Workbook. And I'll save it in this folder. Next, I'm going to shade the invoice area in grey, and it's going to be cells B3 to I77. You can type them up here in the name box, press enter, and it selects the cells. And then I'm going to format them in this pale shade of grey. Okay, next I'll pop a heading in here for invoice. We'll make it 28 point. Let's Control B to make it bold, and I'll right align it. Now you might like to insert a logo into your invoice. I'm just going to draw in a placeholder roughly in this space. You can just imagine this as a logo, and to be clear, I'm just going to type in insert logo here. And let's just quickly center it, and I'll make the font white and a bit bigger. Okay, just imagine that's your logo. Next, you want to enter your company details. And I'm just going to paste them in, Control V to paste. Let me just move that across so it's left aligned. Of course, you can add more fields here. For example, you might need your tax ID or other official identifiers. Over here, I'm going to have my invoice details. So I'm just going to paste in some headings for fields that I want to populate and make them bold. Again, you can customize this. For example, you might want to include the purchase order number. Cell G9 is going to store my invoice number. This can start at 1, 1,000, 10,000, or if you've already been issuing invoices, enter the next number in your sequence. I'm going to start at 1,000. For the date, I'm going to use the today function, and it simply updates every day without me having to do anything. And then for the due date, well, this might be your invoice date plus 30 days, or maybe you use a net 30 end of month, so we could use the end of month function to find the end of the current month and then add 30 days to that. For the amount, we'll come back to that in a moment. And then obviously here I'm going to enter my customer name, address, phone number, email, etc. Next, we need to build a section for our invoice items. I'm going to start that down here, and I need some headings: product code, description, quantity, unit price, discount, and price. Again, modify these as required. Then I'm going to format this as an Excel table using the keyboard shortcut Control T. My table has headers, and click OK. It automatically adds a row to the table, and it's applied this table style, and it's called it Table 1. First of all, we're going to rename it Invoice Items, and I'm going to go up here and choose this white table style, Light 1. Just so it fits in better with my invoice template. I don't need the filter buttons here, and I don't want banded rows. I'm going to Control 1 to open the formatting pane, and on the border tab, I'm just going to add vertical borders in this shade of grey, just to make it a bit clearer on the face of the invoice. The other thing I'm going to do is select some rows, maybe not that many, and I'm going to right click and adjust the row height. We're going to make it 23.25. And I'm going to middle align them. Now the price field is going to be a formula, and I want to round it to 2 decimal places. The formula is the quantity times the unit price times 1 minus the discount. Close parentheses on that, comma, 2 decimal places, close parentheses, and there's my price. I'm just going to tab to insert some extra rows. And then let's insert some sample data. I've just copied some data to my clipboard, and I'll paste it in. So you can see the price automatically calculates. Let's format this as a currency. We'll do the same for the unit price, F4 to repeat that. Let's format the discount column as a percentage, and that's looking pretty good. Now you might like to improve the alignment, so let's indent that slightly. Let's right align all of these numeric headings. Now let's just tab to insert another row. And notice the price has calculated, but of course there's no data for the quantity, unit price and discount, so we get a 0 here. Now it'd be better if it didn't display that 0. So let's apply a custom number format with the cell selected, Control 1 to open the formatting. On the number formatting tab, go to custom. This is the current format, which is fine. Let's Control C to copy it, semicolon. Now I can enter a format for the negative value. So I'll put a minus in and paste in that same format. And then another semicolon and we get the format for 0. Now if I don't put anything in here, then the 0 gets hidden, which is exactly what I want. So I'll click OK. And now we can't see the 0 value on the face of the invoice, but you can see the formula is still there, ready for me should I need it. Right, next we need to add the total items and add tax. So I'm going to add in some headings here, Control-Shift-V. The table has expanded, I don't want that, so Control-Z to undo it. And then for the subtotal, I'm just going to use the sum formula to sum my invoice items table price column. The tax rate in Australia for GST is 10%. The tax amount is going to be rounded. Take the subtotal times the tax rate, comma to 2 decimal places. And then the total is therefore the subtotal plus the tax amount. Let's copy this formatting to the tax amount and total. And let me just copy the formatting for that row down to the total. There we go. Right, let's add some borders to these cells. Control 1 to open the formatting. Border. Let's go with this dark grey. And I'm going to add vertical borders and horizontal, but I don't want the top border because if you look closely, this bottom border of the table is slightly darker. And I don't want to override that on the row above the subtotal. Okay, let's make the total bold. Let's add a new item here just to test it works. Go away Copilot. And you can see the price has automatically calculated. The subtotal has included it. And we're good to go. Now I need to feed the total amount up into my amount cell up here. To do that, I'm just going to first of all rename this cell total. And up here, I'm going to reference that name. There it is there in the autocomplete. Tab to select it, press enter, and there's the total. Let's apply the same currency format so it's consistent. Now below the table, we've got some space for notes. Let's pop that in there, make it bold. And then below that, we can put in our bank details. This is where you'd enter your bank name, bank account details so that you can get paid. Finally, you'll want to set the print area so that you can either print to PDF or paper. My print area is cells B3 to I45, so I'm just going to select them from the name box. And then on the page layout tab, we're going to print area, set print area. And you can see the dashed line indicates the page breaks, which is no good. I want it printed on one page, so let's open the page setup, clicking on the icon in the bottom right. And then on the page tab, I want to fit to 1 page wide by 1 tall. And then under margins, let's center it horizontally and vertically. And let's just pop into print preview and check that it looks all right. It's a little bit squashed. Let's enable the margins and make it a little bit wider. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Let's go back. And next we need to automate copying the invoice details to the tracker sheet, which I haven't created yet, and then assigning a new invoice number and clearing it ready for the next one. So let's rename this sheet invoice, and I'll add a new sheet for the tracker. And here I need columns for invoice, date, due, amount, customer, and paid status. This is going to be a table, so Control T. My table has headers. Click OK. Let's go ahead and remove the formatting. I'll go with this none format here because I'm going to apply some conditional formatting later to help us analyze the data. I'm going to call this table Invoice Tracker, or INV for short. And then in the paid status column, I'm going to insert checkboxes here. That's just going to enable me to check the box if it's paid. Notice in the formula bar, if the box is checked, the actual value is true, and unchecked, it's false. And we'll be using that in our conditional formatting later on. Now, if you don't have this new in-cell checkbox, then you could use data validations on the data tab. Data validation, we can use a drop-down list, and in here you might have paid or outstanding as options to choose from. I'm going to cancel that because of course I've already got the checkbox. Alright, my table is ready to receive the invoice data. Let's set up the macro to automate copying it across. For that, you're going to need the Developer tab. If you don't see it in your ribbon, right-click the ribbon, customize the ribbon. Make sure Developer is checked here and click OK, and it will appear. From the Developer tab, you want to open the Visual Basic Editor. This will open in a separate window. Now, I'm just going to hold down my Windows key and right arrow to set it to the right-hand side, and we'll have the invoice on the left. So under the VBA project, I've got my file here that I'm currently working in. You can see I've got two sheets, invoice and tracker, and what I need to do is add a module for my VBA. That opens this window here, and this is where I type in my macro. The first line is option explicit. This is just going to force me to declare and define my variables, which is good coding practice. Then I'm going to name the macro, starting with sub, and then the macro name, which is record invoice. No spaces, open and closing parentheses, press enter, and it automatically enters the end sub. So between those two subs is where I write the code or instructions for the macro. I'm going to start by listing the variables with dim for dimension. My first variable is my invoice number, and the data type is long, that is, it's an integer or a number. The next one is my invoice date, and that's as a date, that's the data type. Then I have my due date, which is also a date. Then I have my amount, which is a currency. Then I have my customer, which is a text string. Then I need to define my invoice sheet, which is a worksheet. And my tracker sheet, which is also a worksheet. I've also got the table that I'm going to copy my invoice details to. So this is a table as a list object. And that's because a table is known as a list object in VBA. And then finally, I need to declare a variable for my target row. The target row is the next row in the tracker table. So this is as a range. Next, we need to set the worksheet and table. So we set the invoice sheet. So up here we can see there are various objects in this file. Sheet 1 is the object name, and invoice is the name I've given the tab. The tab name is changeable. Someone could go in and change that tab name, but the object name, sheet 1, will always be the same. So it's safer for me to reference the object name here rather than the tab name. So it's going to equal sheet 1, and then I'm going to set the tracker sheet equals sheet 2, and then I'm going to set the table. Well, the table is on the tracker sheet and it's a list object. The name of it is invoice tracker. Remember, we named it. Close double quotes, close parentheses on the table. Oops, I missed the L there. Press enter. Okay. So now we can assign the variable names to the cells they relate to. So I'm just going to type in a comment here that explains what these following items are. This is going to read the values from the invoice. So the name INV that we created up here is going to equal the invoice sheet range, and the cell is, well, if we look at the invoice, we can see it's cell G9, the invoice number. So G9, close double quotes, close parentheses, dot value. So that's the first one. I'm going to copy this because the rest are also on the invoice sheet and they're a range and a value. So the next one is invoice date. That equals invoice sheet range, and that's in cell G10. Next is the due date. That is also on the invoice sheet range, G11. Then we have amount, which is in cell G12, and customer, which is in cell G14. So that's the last one. And we're ready to write the values to the tracker table using an if-then-else statement. So let's just make a comment here, safely decide where to write the data. And I say safely because our table will have a variable number of rows. So we need to first of all identify whether the first row is empty. And if we take a look at the tracker table, we can see that first row is empty. And that will only ever be empty at the very beginning, but we still need to identify it. So the first line is if table data body range is nothing, then, And again, I'm going to comment here, the table has no rows, so we'll add one. To do that, we're going to set the target row to equal table list rows and add range. So if the table has no rows, then we're going to add one. The table always has a row, but we have to do this check, otherwise the code fails. Else if application count A, so we're going to count in the table data body range. Where are we counting? In the rows. Which row? The first row. Actually, we only want to check the first 5 columns, so we're going to resize it to the first row and first 5 columns. Close parentheses. If that count equals 0, then the first row must be empty. So if the first row is empty, reuse it. How do we do that? By setting the target row where it equals the table data body range. Rows, which row? The first row. Else we're going to add a new row. And we do that by setting the target row to equal table.list rows.add.range. So we're going to safely decide where to write the data. If the table range has nothing, then the table has no rows, so we're going to add one. Else, if the count of the first 5 columns equals 0, then the first row must be empty, so we're going to use it. So therefore the target row becomes the first row. Else, we have to add a new row. Therefore the target row then becomes table list rows, add a range. And we simply end if there. So now we've identified the rows, we can write the value to the table. And we do that with target row cells. Which cell? The first cell is going to be a value that equals the invoice number. All right, that I'm going to copy and we're going to paste. The second cell in the row is going to be the invoice date. The third cell is going to be the due date. The fourth cell is going to be the amount. And the fifth is going to be the customer name. And then when all of that's done, we're going to return a message for the user that says invoice recorded, happy days. And that is VB information. And that's the macro to copy the data from the invoice to the tracker automatically. So let's save that and then let's check if it works. First of all, I'll go back into the invoice and let's give our invoice a customer name. We'll make this one for Tom Hardy and it should bring through all of this information into our tracker. So let's run the macro. I'm going to press the play button here just to test it. It says invoice was recorded. Let's go take a look. It looks good. Let's make the columns a bit wider and there's our data. Perfect. So now that I know my macro is working, I can assign it to a button. I'm just going to scroll across to the right here and I'm going to insert just a shape, one of these rectangles with rounded corners, and we'll draw it in here. So this is my record invoice button and let's just format it centered and right aligned. And while I'm here, I'm going to go to the shape format tab and we're just going to format it in this green in keeping with my invoice template. And I'll make the font white. All right, let's also insert an icon just to give this a visual indicator for what this button does. So I'm going to go list, and that one looks pretty good. Insert that. It's a bit big. Let's just make it much, much smaller. And I'll go to the graphics format tab, and here I'm just going to change the fill color to white. Let's group those two shapes together. And now I can assign the macro to this button. So right click, assign macro. Here's my list of macros. There's the one I just created. Click OK. And now if I hover over the button, you can see I can execute the macro. All right, that's ready to go. Now you can then print the invoice or export it to a PDF. Next, we need a macro to clear the invoice and assign a new number. But first, if you're enjoying this and you want to go deeper, whether it's core Excel skills, dashboards, or Power Query, I've got a full range of courses that walk you through everything step by step. And from the 6th to the 15th of May, you can get 20% off. These courses come with a certificate of completion and support from me if you ever get stuck. Thousands of students have taken them, not just to level up their skills, I've heard from people who've built tools for their teams that save them hours every week. They've landed promotions or finally felt confident enough to freelance on the side. So if you're ready to stop Googling Excel and actually master it, now's the perfect time. You'll find the link in the description and pinned comment. Again, we start with sub, and this macro is going to be called reset invoice. Open and close parentheses, and it puts in the end sub. I need to declare my variables. So my variable is the invoice number, and it's a number, which is data type long. This next code is going to issue a new invoice number. And to do that, we want to capture the current invoice number. So our invoice is going to equal the range, which is cell G9, close parentheses. And then we need to increment the invoice number by 1. So we're going to take the range for cell G9, and we're going to say that range now equals invoice plus 1. Next, I need to clear the contents of the cells ready for the new invoice. So I need to select the cells. Which cells? Well, they're in the range G14 to G18. That is these cells here. And we need to clear the table. So we need to clear columns product code through to discount. So that is the invoice items table and columns product code to discount. Close my square brackets on my table, close my double quotes on the range, close parentheses, and what are we doing? We're clearing the contents. That's that one there. And then so that it's ready for my user to start entering data straight away, let's select the bill to cell so they can type in the customer name. What cell is that in? It's in range G14, close parentheses, dot select. And then let's give them a message that says template is reset, new invoice number is, and then we want to concatenate the invoice plus 1, comma, VB information. All right, let's just make this a little wider so that we can see all of the code. So this is my reset invoice code. Let's check that it works. I'll just save it. And then what we should see is the name removed, all of my items here removed, and a new invoice number. Let's see. Click play. It says template is reset, new invoice number is 1001. Click OK, and I'm ready to go. Perfect. So I don't need my VB editor anymore. I can close that down. Let's maximize my Excel window, and we'll assign the macro to another shape. So let's insert the rounder corner rectangle. This one is going to be clear invoice. Let's format it in the same shade of green. We'll go and center it, right align it, make the font white. Let's also insert an icon for this. Let's look for refresh. Okay, that one looks good. I'll insert that. Let's make it white and much, much smaller. And we'll just center it there. All right, should be the same size as the one above. Anyway, I won't spend too much time messing about with the buttons. I think you get the idea. Let's group them and then right click, assign macro. That's our reset invoice. Click OK. Let's run through some final tests, make sure it's all working. So I'll copy in some data. First of all, let's get rid of this row. So I've only got 3. Control-Shift-V to paste in my data. That looks good. Let's tab to insert a new row. Copy in some more data. Control-Shift-V. It's included the new row. All right, let's record the invoice. It says it's recorded. Let's go take a look. It should be invoice 1001. Yes, there is. Oh, I didn't give it a customer, so it's missing the customer name, but that's all right. Let's clear the invoice, ready for the next one, and the new invoice number is 1002. Happy days. Right, let's make this tracker a little bit more helpful. I'm going to select the rows, not the heading, and then we'll add some conditional formatting that highlights when invoices are overdue. So we want a new rule, and I'm going to use a formula to determine which cells to format. We have 2 criteria, so I'm going to use the AND function. The first one is to make sure the paid status is not paid. So not, and then simply select that cell. I need to remove the absolute reference of the row because I want it to check every row. And remember, if the checkbox is checked, the cell will contain true, and if it's not checked, it contains false. So I want it to be not true, and I also want to check that the due date, and again I want to get rid of the $, is less than today, meaning the due date has already passed. So we can use the today function to return today's date. So if those are both true, then let's format this row of cells in a red font, and we'll give it a fill color as well. Let's choose a red, but we'll go into more colors and we'll just tone it down so it's a shade of pink. All right, that looks good. There's a preview of what we're going to get. Click OK. Now nothing here is overdue, so we'd have to force that. Let's change the due date to the 1st of April. And there we go. And then if it's paid, the formatting goes away. Perfect. You can also use the filter buttons to filter out invoices that are paid or not paid. You can search by customers, amounts, due dates, etc. If all that seems like too much work, feel free to download the free template from the link in the video description. And if you're ready to take Excel automation even further, this video is for you. It shows you how to build spreadsheets that update themselves. No extra work needed. So I'll see you there.